This man is a Zulu, and you might suppose from his leopard skin and his magnificent hat that he was on his way to some strange pagan festival. Well, he is on his way to a festival, but not a pagan one, a Christian one. For the Zulus have developed their own Christian sect with their own prophets and their own leaders, and they've incorporated into their Christian ceremonial many of the dances and music of their ancient pagan past. One of the people who's studied this strange sect is Hugh Tracy, one of the great experts in African music. He went to the hills in Zululand around the river Zambezi, where these people assemble in hundreds at one time of the year for a great act of worship. But his film that he sent us doesn't start with the Zulus, it starts with a different people, the Chopi, who live closer to the coast on the river Zambezi. And he went to see the Chopi because they, amongst all the tribes of Africa, are some of the most musical and are great practitioners on the timbila, the African xylophone. This is an African xylophone that I was given actually on the west coast of Africa, but it's essentially the same as the timbila, and you can play a perfectly recognizable tune upon it. But in the hands of an African, of course, a timbila sounds very much more exciting than that. The musicians of the xylophone orchestra assemble on the village dancing ground, sometimes as many as 20 or 30 men, each of them carrying his timbila. There's as much trouble taken in arranging the instruments as there would be with some big Western Philharmonic orchestra. The big bass xylophones have to be set up on stands. These timbilas may look crude, but in fact they're nothing of the kind. They're constructed with as much care as the finest Western craftsman may lavish on, say, a violin. Each note is tuned exactly to its place in the scale. The dancers, too, will perform movements which, to Western eyes, may appear haphazard, but in fact they're frequently just as sophisticated as their musical accompaniment. Timbila music and dancing has been an abiding passion with the Chopi people for centuries. Besides being, on one level, an expression of the spirit of the people, it's also a source of continual enjoyment and a splendid safety valve. Nobody bothers if you get carried away and start showing off. And after all, it's a far better method of releasing your pent-up feelings than beating your wife or hitting your neighbor over the head. These particular Ngodo dances, as they're called, are derived from the old war dances and once had a special purpose, to raise your spirits and frighten your enemies before a battle. The Chopi people of Mozambique have made these xylophones themselves from local materials for many centuries. The first thing is to find the tree which will provide the wood for the notes. There's only one sort that will do, and you can recognize it by its leaves. The old wood, and particularly the roots, make the best notes. Pieces like this one. You need something hollow to act as a resonator, which can be fastened under each note. These hard-shelled gourds, when cleaned out, are just the thing. Wild rubber is the next requirement. The rubber vine bleeds a milky latex when you cut it, and if you leave the juice to dry overnight, you get this elastic raw rubber to make the heads of your xylophone hammers. Several other materials have to be gathered, beeswax and palm leaf string, but already they're beginning to shape the notes. The green wood is quite useless as it is, so when you've given your notes their last trimming, you have to cure them gently over a slow fire. Meanwhile, you shape the spreaders on which the notes will rest in the finished xylophone. Once you have the frame of your timbila put together, you tie on the resonators, all carefully graded for size. It's essential to make all the joints airtight, and to do this, you use beeswax. If the wax is too hard, it's softened by beating it and adding vegetable fat from the makusu tree. Then it's squeezed round the neck of the resonators until there's a really tight fit. For these xylophones, when completed, have to take a lot of punishment. The task requiring most skill is the boring of a tiny hole in the resonator to take a buzzing membrane stretched tight across it, and a little trumpet tube which will give an edge to the tone and increase its volume. The scale to which the timbila is tuned is an extraordinary one. It isn't the usual 8-note scale to which we in the West are accustomed. The Chopi scale has only 7 notes and there are no semitones. Experts say that it's an astonishing scale for anyone to use and extremely unexpected to find it in Africa. Even more amazing, the same scale is used in Siam, and more astonishing still, the notes of both African and Siamese scales have exactly the same pitch. Similar scales are found in Uganda and the Gulf of Guinea, and this has given rise very recently to a startling theory that Indonesian colonists once settled in these parts of Africa. At last, the whole xylophone can be put together, and with every note in place, another good instrument is ready to join the timbila orchestra. This timbila music plays an important part in the everyday life of the Chopi people. Today, in the Chopi village of Philip Ibanguza, there's to be a great feast, for the chief's daughter is getting married. Although this music and dancing is part of their own traditions and customs, the bride and groom, in whose honor the performance is being given, wear bridal veil, gloves and mourning dress, as though they had just been married in any fashionable London church. No matter who else is amused, the bride, by custom, must on no account show any sign of pleasure at this, the moment of leaving home. An African bride and groom in Western formal dress, taking part in a ceremony accompanied by tribal drums and xylophones, may to us appear a little incongruous. But an even stranger blending of the customs of Europe and Africa occurs among the hilly country of Zululand. Here live a sect who dance as an act of worship. And what is perhaps even more extraordinary, they do so as an act of Christian worship. From their little circular villages come a Zulu community who have turned their traditional pagan dances into a Christian ritual. They are members of the Zulu church of Shembe. Once a year, they make a pilgrimage through these lovely valleys to their sacred hill, which they call Nlalankazi. On the flat top of Nlalankazi, about 40 years ago, they say, their prophet Shembe had visions and spoke with the Lord. Here, high up on the side of the hill, they camp for a fortnight, praying, dancing, and joining together in community work. They dug this road over 2 miles long to make it possible to get supplies for their camp nearer to the foot of the hill. All of them, men and women alike, will accept no payment, but work voluntarily for the common good. Amos Shembe, one of their prophet's sons, points out the sacred places on the hill. This is the rock where Prophet Shembe hid himself to escape from local tribesmen who wanted to kill him. This is another sacred spot. They put bunches of wild flowers on all their shrines because Shembe used to say that the Lord would always be pleased with a gift of flowers. This place is sacred because it was among these rocks that Shembe used to sit and contemplate while the conventions were taking place. Amos Shembe walks to the actual spot on the very top of the hill where his father consecrated his evangelists. Every man went through the rite of placing here a rock when he made his solemn vows, and Amos knows who left each stone. This heap must be made up of at least 50,000 pieces. Every pilgrim in a solemn ritual has added 1 stone to this pile over the last half-century. Here they're repairing the last of the sacred places, the altar of their open-air church out on the northern spur of the hill, where all the pilgrims will gather for the daily services. Galilee Shembe, the son of the old prophet and the present leader of the church, gets ready to take a service. Every day, and sometimes twice a day, throughout the fortnight that they're here, these Christian Zulus will climb the steep hill from their camp to take part in their services. And as soon as Shembe sees that they're seated on the ground and ready, he walks along the mountain path from his shelter to conduct the service and preach a sermon. But this is only a preliminary to the dances, for here the audience is passive. Soon, each member will take a personal and active part in worshipping God with his body, a type of ritual which was common in Greek and Roman religions of classical times, but which is surely extraordinary as a Christian manifestation. The subject of Shembe's sermon today is the joy of participating in these dances and of making the long pilgrimage from their homes in the faraway hills. While the people are still singing, Shembe leaves and puts his shoes on again, for it's holy ground near the altar where one must always tread barefoot. The service over, now is the time to prepare for the daily climax to this astonishing gathering, when the Christian dances will take place on the crown of the hill. Every woman will put on her best beads and her dancing kilt. Each piece of brightly colored beadwork has been made by herself for this special purpose of the Zulu Christian dance. The call comes from the top of the hill, and they climb up to the place of worship. At the prayer stone, at the turn of the path, everyone prays before going on to dance. Now the men come, dressed in their traditional costume. Many of them put flowers on one of the shrines as they pass. The dance is marked by great devotion and solemnity. It begins when all the dancers are formed up in their proper groups. Following the old Zulu custom, everybody, according to sex and age, has to dance in his or her own battalion or impi. The men by themselves. And the women and the girls by themselves. Those who are now too old or not well enough to dance sit and watch the others. This old grandfather has been dancing these Christian dances ever since they began 45 years ago. He has never missed one. This man is wearing the famous Zulu feather headdress. And this is the Reverend Father Ngoma, one of the oldest of Shemba's evangelists. That's a homemade trumpet, a length of copper pipe. Running repairs. Her ankle beads have come undone. For some strange reason, the women have always carried black umbrellas in these dances. The umbrellas take the place of decorated dance sticks, which they still brandish in their old-style dances. The married Zulu woman's headdress is hollow and made up rather like basket work by teasing out the hair and weaving it into place with thin reeds. There's a text printed on this woman's apron. Remember the Sabbath day, it says, to keep it holy. It's thirsty work, dancing in the burning sunshine on the hilltop. All this had to be carried 1,000 feet up the mountain on someone's head. These men are dressed in a special uniform which they designed for themselves in the early days of the sect. This has recently fallen out of favor, and nowadays most of them prefer to wear the old traditional Zulu costume. Sometimes their leader, old Galilee Shembe himself, dances with one of the companies, and this they regard as a great honor. Aged Zulu women often walk sedately up and down in front of the impis, as they do in their traditional dances in their own villages, calling out the izibongo, or praises. A tin or mug of spring water, a plaited ring and a stone are used by each pilgrim in the final rites. When all the services and religious dances are done, there remains only the ceremony of placing the stones on the cairn and burning the flowers. Everybody brings their stone, and with it a mug of water, which one of the evangelists will pour out for them, so that the stone can be placed on the cairn with clean hands. Galilee Shembe leads his people across to the pilgrim's cairn. All these small wild flowers, which have been offered at the various shrines, are collected in a heap and set alight, so that everyone can pass through the aromatic smoke, inhaling its fragrance like incense. This will bless them throughout the coming year. Until the very last stone has been put in position, they march round and round the cairn with the older evangelists leading the singing. Now, last of all, Galilee Shembe himself performs the rite. Evangelists pour water for the washing of his hands, and he places his own stone on the cairn. The fire of wild flowers burns low, and the Christian dances on the hilltop are over until, with the return of another Zulu summer, the pilgrims will come again to their sacred hill.